parents came from India, lots of people living in one house, families living in one bedroom, and then parents working very hard, and then getting into Western culture with the drinking and the meat, that kind of stuff, which wasn't probably traditionally as much of our culture in terms of our family. And so Barak is in a bigger gate, I guess. And then um, that was growing up, and you just knew what you knew. So the things that I would see growing up, it was just all I knew. So it was normal for me. So a lot of conflict in the family, a lot of getting drunk, having fights, not with me because I was a kid, but seeing kind of relatives, uncles, brothers getting into kind of drunken brawls and that kind of stuff. A lot of keeping face. So you'd go to a lot of family parties. You might have conflict in your family, but then you'd go to a family party on a Saturday and you'd dress up and you'd dance and everything would be really rosy on the outside. But then you'd come back and it's still be the same issues and that kind of stuff. And my dad passed away when I was young, so he passed away when I was 4, and he passed away on Christmas, Boxing Day, and the circumstances are a bit unique because he used to work for British Airways, which isn't unique. Probably every uncle in West London worked for British Airways, but we used to get free flights. He sent us to Canada. I was with my mama over Christmas, and then we got a call to say that he had a stroke. He wasn't going to make it, so we had to come back before they would turn the machines off, just to say our goodbyes. But he wasn't there when we got back, really. And so then my mum brought me and my brother up, and I think that was probably really challenging for her. She had my brother who is a rebel, and as much as she wanted to parent him through the traditional approaches of beating us with dande and kharchiyan and that kind of traditional Punjabi parenting approach, I don't think he responded very well to that. So although it might have worked in the very short term, it didn't really change his behavior long term. And I think seeing a lot of my brother and my mum's relationship put me off doing a lot of stuff, because I would see her cry a lot, and I would see, he'd go out, wouldn't come home. I see the impact it was having on her, and then that put me off drinking. It put me off a lot of things. So, and then in hindsight, it's God's grace that I went through all of those things, because I don't know if I would be in Sikhi today if I hadn't been through all of those things then. But at the time, it was a difficult period, although that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to sound like a sob story, because everyone has challenges.
Yeah.
And everyone goes through difficult periods when they're growing up, or in married life, in adulthood. And I just feel blessed to be where I am today. If I take the positives for it, there's lots of positives. Like, I have a wonderful family. I have a great relationship with my mum. I have really great sangat, and I get to have opportunities like this. So I'm really blessed.
I'm interested in your journey towards Sikhi, because you said there was not much exposure growing up to Sikhi, and so I'm just curious as to how you kind of started to connect with spirituality.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a common experience for men to get to a certain age. I think I was probably about 17, 18, and I thought there's got to be more to life. And when I did the Last Basics podcast, I kind of forgot to talk about this part. But there's a few people I know who got to that age, got to that university age, and they thought, they're kind of independent. They can make their own minds up about stuff. It's not about, oh, my mom told me this, so that's what I have to believe now. And they can do their own research. And I think a lot of men go on a bit of a quest at that point in their lives, and they try and figure out who they are, who they want to be, what is the meaning of life, why am I here, all of those kind of questions. And for me, I started reading into Buddhism and other religions, and then got to go to BoS camp. So that was probably my introduction into Sikhi, was that period at university where I was going through a process of self-discovery and trying to figure out who I was and, what's the point of life and what's the point of all of this. And those questions weren't really asked in my family. It was more just, you go through the motions and you do what you're supposed to do. You do the obligatory kind of family events and socializing, and then you do your own stuff. But the deeper questions in terms of how are you doing, like no one ever asked those questions. And so I think you get to a point where you're kind of thinking, I need to figure out how I'm doing on the inside.
Yeah.
And not worry too much about this university course or getting through this coursework and all of those kinds of things that seem big at that period of time, but overarching, they're not as important as your mental health.
So, when you were on that search for kind of purpose and like, is there more? At that point, you'd been through all of the things you mentioned. And I know you also were really into training. And
my cohort of friends, we were all from single parent families. Our fathers had either left or had passed away, and we all were probably troubled in a way. I remember being sent to this youth club for people who had high potential but who were trouble. So he just sent me to this after school club, which it wasn't that
caused
productive.
More trouble.
But it kind of kept us off the street. And there was we had Pairwan in Southall at that period of time, which it used to be an old Gurdwara. Then Uncle Roshi, who's a bit of a legend in Southall, turned it into a wrestling akhada. And so we had keys to that place. And that whole old school mentality was, if people are training, they stay off the streets, they won't go into drugs. And so there was a push towards, okay, let's get the youth into training. It'll keep them off the streets, keep them off gang fights and drugs and that kind of stuff. So that was probably a really important thing at that period of time.
So do you feel it really helped with kind of...
Yeah, I think I could have gone either way. I think the training gave me a sense of focus and direction. It gave me something to do as well.
Yeah.
I think for me anyway, idle thumbs are the devil's workplace. I think when I don't have anything to do, it's not necessarily the best used time for me. I know you're really different, but so keeping busy with training, having that discipline, having that kind of regimented life, not having a dad growing up and not having any routine or discipline or focus, that kind of whole army or monk kind of lifestyle really appealed to me, of having, this is the time you wake up, this is the time you train, this is how many hours you train for, this is what you eat. And that lifestyle really added some structure when I didn't have any structure in my life. So that probably kept me away from a lot of other things that would have potentially lured me away into more negative paths. And I think that's, again, probably something similar for a lot of males. I think it's a biological need for men to train. There's lots of men that I've spoken to who are married and they're completely different in their relationship if they're training and if they're not training. So I think it is something that we potentially easily drop, but it's a very important mechanism for maintaining our mental health, is just to keep on top of our training. You're smiling.
I can vouch for that. That when you're training, you're I don't know, just more relaxed, less tense.
It's weird because when I was going through those formative years, you have all this kind of nervous energy and aggression, testosterone, whatever it is, and just training just kind of burns you out in a way, and then you're serene after that, and until the next day, and then you train again, and then you feel great again. But it's great to have some kind of regulating mechanism before you get into spirituality, or even afterwards. It's great to have something that can balance you out whenever you're going through the highs and lows. And for me at that period of time as well, my home life was really turbulent. So I used to have a lot of conflict with my brother. We used to have physical fights. I can go into detail if you want, but we used to have a lot of, some of the physical fights that me and my brother used to have. And so there's a lot of violence and a lot of conflict at home because he was living one way of life. I was trying to live another, not doing a very good job at it. But he was the elder in the family, so he kind of felt squashed and not free to live the life he wanted. And then we would have conflict over that, and then there was a lot of fighting at home. And then with my mom, she's stuck in the middle, so she would try things like locking us both out of the house in the cold at night. But that we would then band together and figure out a way to get back in the house. But it didn't solve the kind of underlying issues that me and my brother had, and other issues that were going on at that period of time. So training gave you something that was consistent, whereas at that period of time, people were very inconsistent. People were, your friend one day, and then next day you're trying to kill each other. And so that was that consistency that wasn't dependent on anybody was really helpful. And the kinds of people that I was training with, they were all really good people. So God's grace, I fell into a really good crowd that was like, don't get into drugs, don't get into this kind of stuff. They had very disciplined lives. So it kind of rubbed off on me a little bit.
So does it seem as if, like, in some ways the Sangat and the training kind of helped to offset some of the earlier struggles or the struggles that were happening at that time? Because, like, from a psychology perspective, we talk about how our early experiences shape us, and sometimes we believe that they brand us for life, for example, which I don't believe to be true. But, I'm just thinking that in the terms of the person you started to become and are now, how big do you think that those childhood experiences, how big is the part that they play now? I mean, do they feel, because you talk about them as if, you can see how they've made you the person you are now. But do you feel they still have any kind of underlying negative impact, or do you feel that actually you're in a completely different place?
I've tried to explore that, and I've tried to think about, do I need to think about some of the stuff I saw or experienced when I was a kid and the impact it potentially had on me, and why that means I'm like this, or that means I did this. And I don't think that's, for me, is a helpful line to go down. I agree with more what Benji's philosophy is that you can be anything you want to be. If you just got to work on yourself, and the past doesn't define you. So that kind of stuff has worked better for me. And so if I just focus on the present moment and the things that I'm working on, I am a lot happier and do a lot better than if I focus on, why did that person do that to me, or how could this person let this happen, and all of that kind of stuff. I feel like is not productive, is not helpful. I personally don't feel like it's helped me to go down those roads. Whereas when I think about, if I had gone down those roads, I probably wouldn't have been where I am today, and probably would not have got into Sikhi, and probably would not have just tried with earnest to go down that path, because I would have thought, I could never do that because of this, or because of that, or because of my family, or because of and my friends, my training friends, they're still my friends today, the same friends I've had for 32 years. I still have the same friends today, and they're really good people, and they're martial artists. And I think martial artists, or people who train, they generally have quite good characteristics as people. And I think that's really been really helpful for me, to have people like that around, who I can rely on. I know I can call them 2:00 in the morning. I know they would be there if I ever had a problem. If I know they wouldn't do things like talk about me behind my back, just little basic things which are more of the old school mentality, which probably people don't connect with as much today. But going back a generation or 2 generations ago, those kind of like "Ye Dosti," that Hindi song. I sing.
Do you want to sing it for us?
No.
Usually singing it around the house.
We can maybe copyright laws and stuff. But that kind of Indian relationship, and that kind of bond that you can have with somebody who's not a family member, I think traditionally that was more of a big thing. In Punjab, when I was a kid, I'd see men walking, holding hands, that kind of stuff together, and just really close friendships where it's like you're more than family, or you're bonded. You're like this deep connection that you have with a friend. But that isn't as apparent nowadays. And I really like those relationships that I've got to form. I feel really blessed to have those, and those people have really helped, because regardless of Sikhi, I feel like they loved me before and they still love me now. And in a way, I kind of really value those relationships, because I feel like they're not my friends because of who they think I am or who I look like I am, but they're people that I've known for so long that they love me regardless of whether I choose to go down this path or that kind of stuff. And I feel blessed to have those kind of friends and family members and connections in my life.
I think that's a really important point. Like we say, Jaisi Sangat Vaisi Rangat, that whoever you spend your time with, you become like them. And like you said, you know, it's been God's grace, Guruji di Kirpa, that you found that right Sangat. But what would you suggest to anybody who feels like they don't have that? I mean, even in the kind of world that you're talking about, the training world, it's so easy to get down the wrong path where, you know, there's kind of steroids involved and things like that, which can be the complete opposite of what you're talking about, which is, you know, it's focusing on your health, it's the discipline, and it's good for your mental health. So what would you suggest? What should people be looking out for, or what can people do to kind of help them find that kind of good company?
Yeah, I think don't be fooled by the way somebody looks. So don't think just because somebody is a Singh, or just because they're not, or just because they look like a certain way that they know that they're good people. So I think there's certain characteristics, like, you know, there's lots of people in this room right now, and I can think of many characteristics of each person that makes them, I would love to have those characteristics. And I think when you come from that place, and you can take good from the people you're around, and there's a lot of good in those people, then you're really fortunate to be in that position, regardless of whether they're Sikhs, a different religion, whatever they look like, or whatever their background is. And so I think there's a chapter in Bhai Rama Singh's book, and he says that he used to pray for Sangat, and then somehow he found this family. He used to do Amrit Wala every morning, and then he did Amrit Wala with them for a really long period of time, years. And I feel like if you generally want to come into contact with somebody, if you're in the right place, like Benji, you say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I think if you invented that. So I think if you really have that piyas and that hunger and that book inside you, I think God will introduce you to certain people. And then I think it's up to you to be in that vessel, to be in the right, you know, condition to be able to take that advice, or to be able to look at that person's gun and not their avgun, and all of those kind of things. And I think when you come from a background like mine, it's easier to see people's gun because you don't have any yourself. And then you kind of see, oh, you know, that I'd love to be like that. I'd love to be as polite as this person, or I'd love to have that kind of relationship with my mum, or that kind of stuff. And then you can pick up on all of these things. But there's a family that I used to pray for, a family to similar with, and then I met them, and I don't know where I'd be without them, because for years they really kept me on the straight and narrow. Just they used to do Simran together every evening, and they would let me come as well. And so if you can find somebody who's doing the things that Gurbani talks about, like Nit Jayet Satsangati Jite Har Ka Har Naam Boloiye, and you know, Satsangat Kaisi Janiye Jite Eko Naam Vakhaniye. If you can find, like, we can use Gurbani as a kaswati and think, okay, this is Gurbani saying find this kind of person who has this kind of values or characteristics. And then if we have a genuine desire, and if we seek those people out, and if we're in the right place, I feel like we can learn a lot. I'm not saying I have. There's lots of great people that I've met, which I feel like I've let down because I haven't been the greatest student or even a good student. But I feel like, you know, God is so, that we're so blessed to have a human birth. And I'm so blessed to be in a Sikh family, to be born in a Sikh family, to have access to Sangat. There's probably, you know, there's a billion people in the world who don't even have access to water, let alone things like transport or clothes to wear for the day, or you know, those kind of basic needs. So I feel so fortunate that, you know, it's a blessing. So I think if we come from that position, then those blessings will just multiply, and will be introduced to those people.
So there's a few things there. So you've mentioned a couple of times is to pray, so that power of ardas. When I was coming into Sikhi, it was the same thing. I once asked on a group, how do you find this sad sangat that Guru's talking about? And it really impacted me. And the person wrote on there is to find that sangat, you've got to start to become that sangat. So that's the second thing, is do your ardas and start to make those little steps and figure out who you want to become. And those people will come to you. That's how I met Benji and you guys as well, was, doing that heartfelt ardas. But also, and I don't mean it in a cheesy way, but this attitude of gratitude. So you're saying, when you come from the kind of background I came from, you look for these things, but that's not necessarily true. Some people will look for the opposite. They'll find reasons for why life is hard, why people aren't trustworthy, whereas you're looking at gratitude and basically using that for yourself to further develop yourself.
Yeah, Darshan Kaur says I've become a senile old man and grumpy as well. And I think I've had lots of negative experience. We used to have this Thai boxing coach who, when you're doing interclubs and training and you're potentially fighting, you're putting your life in this person's hands. That's how I used to see it. And then there was a little bit of trust issues there. It was to do with money. And then so that kind of really calloused me a bit because it made me very apprehensive about trusting people in that kind of guru position, that teacher position, about who you choose to be your teacher. I think that calloused me towards that. And then that's happened again later on as well when I got into Sikhi. So I feel like you have to be careful as well. You have to think, okay, well, Gurbani is saying find people like this, but it's also saying, where there's Nindya, that place is a shappar, and like you have to have the courage to distance yourself as well and think, well, actually this isn't right. And I think you can take the positive from those scenarios as well, which would be ideal. And I probably need to do more of that. But I feel you do need to have the courage and the self-confidence to think, actually, you know what, as much as I love this person, this person is not right for me to actively seek out, to spend time with, and I need to have the courage to change my sangat.
Yeah, and I feel like you have different sangat in your life at different times. So it's just because, certain people have helped you at a certain time in your life doesn't mean that then you necessarily have to stay there, and Guru will bring in whoever you need to be having that company of who you need to learn from at different points. So I think that's really important as well, that you're not just thinking, oh, this person helped me out, so I owe them. Or even with family, like you talked about your brother, and I kind of come similar background, just that typical Punjabi background where there's a lot of, lots of things going on which I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with. But that doesn't mean just, it means that I'm there for my family, but it doesn't mean that I have to continue partaking in that because they brought me up, kind of thing, which I think, is another conflict that comes up for us, is, like you said, was, we've got this other kind of life that's coming towards us, the spirituality, and then you've got all the people who you're maybe not leaving behind, but you're kind of like, that's not for me. So how do you kind of balance that without upsetting your own family, but then not compromising the kind of life that you want to lead?
Yeah, I think Basics I was listening to a Basics talk on this yesterday. I think it was by Mandeep Singh, and he was talking about if your family want to go to parties and you don't want to go, how do you manage that kind of situation? I thought his advice was brilliant for somebody who seems young to, the Basics guys are really wise. And he was talking about how you've got to just go with each individual scenario on a case-by-case basis. So he said he's gone to some parties and then he's left early because he'll just say it's not his thing, and his family are great enough to accept that. For me, in my training days, I would miss weddings, I would miss parts, I wouldn't miss training. And my mum kind of gave up on me in the sense that she knew I wasn't going to obligate to any kind of family commitment, and she'd probably yell at me about it, but then she couldn't physically force me to go somewhere. Once my brother passed away, that changed, because now she doesn't, my brother would always go, so it was okay because there was a representative from the family. And so now again, I'm really blessed, similar to BoS, that I have a family who understands. So I will do certain things and go to certain things, and then I will also say no to certain things. My mum is probably the closest relationship I have in my family. So she can probably twist my arm and get me to do stuff that I don't want to do. But generally with the others, they think, oh, he's the religious one. If he says no, we can't really force him. Or, my gran won't say certain things to me because, she might say it to somebody else. Oh, can you get him to come to this thing? Or, but they are really good like that. But I think the training side made me more selfish. I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten a bit more sensitive to how my actions make other people feel and how it might impact other people, and how actually I'm in a marriage now and I do have some responsibilities in terms of family and all of those kind of things. And I think it's hard for guys because they're trying to manage their relationship with their family, which guys, I don't think, from the guys I know, they're not as good as that as women are potentially. And they're trying to they potentially have in-laws. There's a lot of dynamics. There's friends from different, might be from college, from university, from Sangat. There's lots of relationships that they have to manage. But I'm getting close to 40 now, and my realization is that I just need to be selfish and I just need to make sure I'm okay. Because if I'm not okay, then it's kind of like, what is it? What's the point of it all? And the other people, those other stakeholders, at the end of the day, if they love me, they want the best for me. They want me to be happy. And if all of these other interactions or commitments are making me unhappy, then I need to just take a step back and look after myself, because no one else can do that for me. So one of the things I say to Darshko is like, no one else can manage my mental health, right? A bit like going to the gym. No one else can go and do press ups for me, or go and eat the right foods for me, or go to sleep at the right time for me. I have to be disciplined enough to do that for myself. But other things like, going to a social engagement or doing this thing or not doing it, other people can potentially do that or understand. So it's just, I feel like the older you get, the more, as a male, there's that shabad, isn't there, about Pehla Pyar Laga Tandud, and then goes to the 10th, like 9th or 10th phase is your grumpy old man. And I feel like I'm getting at that grumpy old man phase. And now I'm becoming a bit more selfish, looking after myself and thinking, I know the kids need me, I know Darshko needs me, but I really need this for myself.
Sure. And you kind of, sorry.
Okay.
You're kind of calling it selfish, which is it's a loaded term. But actually, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. And I think that's the issue. So what you're saying is brilliant. For me, it's about priorities. As you get older and wiser, you learn to set those priorities. So you can only give out what you've got. So if you end up being full of resentment and anger because you're having to keep everybody happy, then that's what you're going to give out when you go to all these places. So I wouldn't say it's about being selfish. And I think when we sorry to you, but when we call it being selfish, automatically it makes us want to step away from it and not do it, because culturally we're taught, this is about seva, we should be selfless beings. But actually, that's a stage we can get to at some point, but unless we're willing to take out that time for ourselves, for what keeps us well, physically, mentally, spiritually, then we're not going to be any use to anybody else, especially, our wives or husbands or children and parents. So I think that's really important just to say that.
I was going to say as well that it's been a journey to get to this point in terms of, like we all change, and marriage and having children and all of that, it transforms you, and we have to learn the lessons we have to learn, right, to keep going and to keep sane. So, because with yourself, like you are very much wanting to be everything for all of us, right? The perfect husband, the perfect parent, and then with family as well, trying to keep everybody happy. And then that slowly over time it has changed, but it's taken time, isn't it? It's been a journey to get to the point where you're like, actually, I need to really prioritize my well-being. Yeah,
and it's a work in progress. Like when my brother passed away, I thought, I really want to support my niece and nephew. I really want to support my puppy. And then I was thinking, I've got 10 people that I need to support, like just in my immediate family. And I was like, okay, I need to earn this much. I need to work this many hours to be able to do that. And I do feel like as males, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And it was my mum and my gran who they would say, Bande chai diya, cheez jani chai diya. And, you really got to, just as long as you're okay, everything else is going to be fine. And mum would say, don't take too much stress on about kind of stuff. It's as long as you're all right, that's the important thing. And I feel males, they have this, and probably human beings, they have this underlying desire to be loved. And I think a lot of my actions have stemmed from that. So when you grow up in a single parent family, you might not get that kind of love and attention just because your parents' bandwidth is spread so thin from so many different commitments. And then you're looking for that in relationships as you get into your teenage years, and then you look for that in marriage, and then it's like,
and you find it. No, I'm just joking.
and it's like there's this emptiness that needs to be filled, and there's this peace of mind that needs to be achieved, which I feel like was happening in that university phase. And then I think there's this underlying steering wheel of what this desire to be loved and accepted, and I think that molds people or drives me. So I would do anything for, you know, to be loved. So I would do things that potentially I don't want to do, but I don't want to not be loved and not accepted. And I think that's something that comes with age as well, that you realize, actually, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this just to be accepted, or just to get some pyar from somewhere?
What would you say would be the Gurbani perspective of that?
I'd have to think about that. If we could have a long pause and then edit it out. But there's Gurbani Shabads related to everything, right? I remember going to India, and there was these two Gursikhs, and they would converse in Gurbani Shabads. So, you know, they wouldn't say anything else outside of Gurbani. It would just be, one would say Shabad, the other one would say Shabad, and have a conversation in this way. So there's not anything that isn't covered in Gurbani. But you know, Jin Prem Ki Utin Hi Prapayo, like Gurbani talks about the importance of love, but everything in Gurbani is steered towards God. But then we have our relationships, and all of these things are a manifestation of God. And we have Mat Pita Sudbanta Istmitar Pai Purab Janam Ke Mile Sanjogi Ante Kona Sahai. Like all of these relationships, Guru Sikhs used to explain that the person you do the most Simran with in your past life, that's the person you get to be married to. So that's the responsibility within this birth, is to do as much Simran as you can together. So, and potentially if you're doing that kind of stuff, then you experience that love, but it comes from God. That fulfillment, that feeling of that emptiness comes from God, as opposed to looking for it in outside things that aren't going to fulfill it. And I'm not at that stage.
But it's still good to have that awareness, right? So for me, I can relate a lot to that. And even though I didn't come from a single parent family, you know, I had both parents, it was still that, you know, that's the kind of hole that you have inside of you, and you're constantly searching for attention, and not, you know, like attention seeking behavior necessarily, but just wanting that feeling of love that you're talking about. But for me as well, you know, more recently, has been actually, this is what my guru's telling me, that you're not going to find it outside of yourself. It doesn't matter how many people you please. And I'm, you know, have been a chronic people pleaser. But in the end, it just led to a lot of internal resentment. But actually coming on this path of Sikhi in a different way now is just realizing, actually, I can find that inside of myself. And if I take that time out actually to find it inside of myself, I can be so much better as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as Sangat as well. So, you know, I'm not saying I'm there yet either, but it's definitely something worth considering, is what are we prioritizing?
And if you had, because I'm thinking of people that message me on Instagram and places that I've been in, and you potentially have someone who's doing the right stuff, they're doing the part, they're trying to do Sangat, but they don't have necessarily that close connection with anybody to do Dukh Sukh, and they're not happy, like, you know, and they might be suffering from a problem like the low mood or something. And so what do you say to those people? Because, you know, it's difficult when you're in that position, isn't it? When you're in that kind of cave or that dark place, or you got that cloud looming over you, and people are like, oh yeah, do your part, do your Simran, and you're like, yeah, I am.
I think that the biggest thing that stands out for me is Bande Koj Dil Har Roj Na Fir Pareshani Mahe. So, Guru saying, do that Koj within your own heart. And then your pareshaniya, like your worries, go away. And it's not as simple as that. So there's two things that I take from that shabad. One is we've got to search, again, within. The search is not without, like it's this person causing it or it's this situation causing it. What is going on within me? But also as that search deepens, for me, it was Koj of Gurbani, like really trying to understand. It's not enough to just read Gurbani. We have to start to try to understand it. We have to start to live it. But the thing that's really helped me to get deeper with that is a Simran practice, because then I'm, when you want a relationship of love, the first thing you need to do is to get to know that person. You've got to spend time with them to get to know them. And then slowly that PR builds, like it's a spontaneous thing. And so for me, it's like, okay, I've got to spend time to figure out what is my guru actually saying, even if I'm reading it in English. But then if guru's pointing me inwards, then I've got to spend time with myself. I've got to sit. Not got to, but, now it's like I want to sit with myself. I want to figure out and find out, Guru's telling me this Jyot Sarup is within me, that Vaheguru's within me. So actually sitting and doing that. And it's not an easy practice by any means. It is really difficult. But I think, like you've said, reaching out to that Sangat, if you can see that someone's doing something differently and it's working for them, reach out to them, do something different than what you're already doing and try and make that connection. It's not going to be a spontaneous, all of a sudden everything's, okay. It does take time, as with anything. But the question I always have in my mind is, what's the alternative? Because if you've been doing what you've been doing all this time and you're still ending up in the same place as a coach, right? Then at some point you've got to do something differently to have a different outcome as well.
I feel like males, sorry to interrupt you, I feel like males are not very good. Like I could probably count on my hands that the males who, if they were going through a problem, they would reach out and say to somebody, look, I need to talk to you about this, right? Yeah. Like the kind of male who's self-assured enough to be able to do that is probably one in a million. And I feel like that's a problem, because then you're just suffering in silence. And when I had my daughter, when we had our daughter, it should have been one of the most blissful times of my life. She means the world to me. But I was so overwhelmed with everything that was going on that it was actually a really difficult period. And if I had just reached out to some of my friends and said, you know what, I'm really struggling here, they, even just a reassurance, that haunsla, it would have felt like so much. But it's just this thing, I think, that I have, that you can't show weakness, you have to have this bravado, it's like it's not okay to have conflict with your wife and to be able to talk to a friend about it and that kind of stuff. And I feel like that is very toxic, because a lot of bad things come as a consequence of when you're in that mindset. And that's one thing I want to say. The other thing is, there are people who have messaged me who feel like they don't have anybody that they can reach out to. And then the third thing is, I've been in the situation where I don't want to go inside. I just, I'm not in the right frame of mind where I just think, I'll sit for 5 minutes to do Simran, and 5 minutes just feels like it's an hour. I just think, forget it. I just turn the timer off and watch TV, Netflix or something. But, or, like you might be reading Bard and you're suffering, but you just can't connect.
So I think it's better placed that actually you answer the question, having had those experiences.
Because you're always like looking up self-development, and since the moment I married you, I was like, oh my God, this guy's like, going to like conferences and like Anthony Robbins, and like you're always doing something, and like gratitude journals and all of that. But what are kind of the main things do you feel that have kept you afloat or got you through some of the difficult times?
Yeah, for me, it's been training mostly. And when Baji passed away, I had some counseling, because you recommended I have some counseling because I was getting angry a lot.
Yeah.
And after about 9 months, I gave in, and I had, I think, about 3 or 4 sessions. And the counselor was like, who do you talk to? And I was like, I don't talk to anybody. And He was like, maybe you should talk to somebody. And I was like, isn't that what you're here for? And he was like, oh, when did you not feel like this? I said, oh, when I was training, I felt so happy. Everything was great. And he was like, oh, do you still train? I said, no. He was like, why don't you start training? I said, yeah, all right then. And then I stopped having counseling, and I started training, and then I just felt so much better. And it wasn't necessarily talking about issues. Never really talked to those guys about that I was struggling because I missed my brother or anything like that. It was more that this group of guys just takes you out of the frame of mind you're in, puts you in a different frame of mind, positive things are happening, the training, endorphins and all of that kind of stuff, and you feel better within your own skin because you feel stronger, you feel fitter, you don't struggle to get up the stairs and all of that kind of stuff, and all of that positive feedback loop just helped me feel better at that period of time. But training might not be the right like go-to solution for everybody.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that even though it doesn't feel like it's a natural thing that you can do to speak to somebody, it doesn't mean it's not the right thing for you. So, as a woman, for me, I had to always struggle to speak to people as well. I've always kept things on the inside. I've always tried to support everybody else, but not deal with my own stuff. So it wasn't natural for me. And the same thing, counseling was suggested and I kept refusing it. And then I took it up and it did open up a new world for me. And now Benji knows you can't shut me up. I'll tell everybody everything. There's no boundaries. But it's really important. So one of the things that I take is when we look at Gurbani, the Gurus, their emotions are all in there. Like, if you take Shabad Hazare, when Guru Arjan Dev Ji gets sent away from Guru Ram Das Ji, like they're pouring their heart out into those letters. They're telling them how they feel. And I think it's really important that there's this cultural identity that we've got, is that, men should be this masculine, strong on the outside, and they shouldn't let anything touch them. But is that reality, and is that what, our kind of, the people who we look up to, is that who they are? If you think of the most well-rounded male that what are their habits? And I know that's something that you will do as well. You kind of look into people and see how they've done things. So I guess my question is just because it's difficult, not just because, but because it's difficult for men to talk about things, does that mean that they shouldn't talk about them?
I don't think society, and I'm talking about my own personal experience. So when I speak to Darshan Kaur about, I'm going to go speak to this person, or she's confessed to me that she feels like, why doesn't he just do part of Simran? Like she's a psychologist, and even she falls victim to that. So I think it is a very common thing for males to feel like they can't talk about their issues. They have to put on this persona. Everything is always fine. They're the tough, strong one, and everything's in hand. And actually, it's not okay to show weakness. It's not okay to show vulnerability. And I've experienced that. I went to a camp recently, and one of the Sevadars had heard a talk I had done on suicide prevention. And he said, I've never experienced any problems, so I don't really understand people who experience problems, like where they're coming from. And I felt bad because I put my kind of heart on my sleeve when I'm talking about stuff. And this guy is saying, that never happens to me. It must just be you. And so it's society and everybody is reinforcing that message that it's not okay.
Yeah.
And I think then it's very difficult to, share your dukh sukh with somebody.
I was thinking about, when you were struggling with jap, for example, or any points that you've struggled and I've been aware of it or whatever. And I remember reflecting on it and thinking, when you talk to me about your struggles, I struggle with that. If I'm really honest, things have changed now a little bit. But when we were both really, struggling, I think seeking support within the marriage is a tricky one, because usually if one partner is struggling, the other one is too. And when we had the two little ones very close in age, and I was just about coping and you were just about coping, we were both sleep deprived, and if one of us starts saying we're struggling, the other one's like, yeah, well, I'm struggling, it's that
like
kind
couples
of
therapy, isn't it?
But it's like, that's the thing. It's like, I think you're right. There is and you know, if there's any women listening to this podcast as well, just reflecting on like, how do you truly, what comes up for you when your partner says, I'm really struggling?
The message I get is it's not okay to
Yeah.
tell my wife what I'm feeling,
Yeah.
because that message is constantly reinforced. So it's like, okay, I'm getting this little light bulb in my brain. There's not much going on in this. So it's very easy to have space for a light bulb. The light bulb goes off, and it's not okay to tell Darshak about like when I have a problem with something.
Yeah.
So okay, I need to find some other way of dealing with this.
Yeah.
And you know, luckily I have some friends who I can call and just talk about something else, and sometimes it just snaps me out of it or helps in that moment, but not everybody has that. And so yeah, it is very challenging. And when you hear about scenarios where worst case scenarios have happened and all of this kind of stuff happens, you know, I feel dukh. I feel like this person's in Sangat, they've been born into Sikhi, and I wasn't there to support this person, or we didn't support this person as a community. And I feel like it's shame on us. It's that we've made it not okay for people to talk about when they have a problem.
Yeah. And I was thinking on the converse, like whenever I would come to you with a problem, for example, it would be really good. I'd find it really helpful because you would listen. You'd just listen, and you know, you wouldn't be like, okay, you need to do more Simran, we need to do more part. It would just be, even though if that was a solution that would really help me, like, you know, honestly, like if we're talking honestly, you know, if I'd come to, even now, sometimes when I feel overwhelmed, I'll be like, you know, I'm really struggling, and I'll just cry, or I'll, you know, speak about it, and then you just listen. And I'm learning slowly from that, which is that sometimes I need to create that space where I'm just listening. I don't have to jump in with solutions. And you know, we say that, innit, women are better at listening and men are better at problem solving. But I think for me, it's the other way around.
I feel like we all have this need to be heard.
Yeah.
And that need is really important to satisfy. It's very hard to not feel heard and to go through life feeling like you don't have a voice or your opinion it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I was also thinking, you know, like in terms of marriage, thinking about marriage since we're talking about it, like, you know, I think we really struggled early on. A lot of the reason because of that was because, you know, you believe your marriage is going to solve everything, and you believe that it's got to be everything for you. Like your partner is going to be your confidant, is going to be your support, is going to be, you know, you're going to be a team. You've got all these this conditioning around what marriage is going to be. And then when that doesn't happen, it's like, oh my gosh. And then slowly I think you learn that marriage isn't, you know, it's not the solution in terms of, there are loads of benefits, and with Guru's grace, it's an opportunity to further your spirituality as well. But it doesn't have to be like, if you don't feel like you can speak to your wife, or I don't feel that I can reach out to you, I find it's okay to have other avenues where you can connect to and be like, okay, look, I can speak to this person, I can deal with that there, or, you know, don't know what you think.
Yeah, I would totally agree. So, you know, and in my experience, you know, again, it was the flip side. You know, I felt like I really wanted to talk to my husband when I was going through such dark times, but it was the same, you know, it was like I'm struggling as well. And he just didn't know how to listen. He didn't know how to hold that space if someone's upset, because he's never been taught. So for me, it was the same realization that, you know, the kind of the units we live in right now is, you know, my husband or my wife should be everything for me. But if we look historically, even culturally, you know, women had, you know, their kind of sangha, you know, the other women in the family or their friends they would go to, and men would have other men. And they wouldn't necessarily talk in the same way that women do, but there would always be an outlet. There would always be somebody you could go to, you know, even if it was, you know, the guru, or it was the pradhan, or somebody, an elder, a wiser person that you can go to, and you can kind of release that. And I think that's really important. So, you know, we know the power as a psychologist, you know, through counseling, through coaching, between the three of us, we know the power of just holding that space and being non-judgmental, showing empathy. And you're not always going to get it from your family members. You're not even necessarily going to get it from who you think your friends are. But it's a case of finding that somewhere, whether that's a professional service or whether that's, you know, somebody you respect in the Sangha, you know, people are reaching out to you, Viji, and it doesn't mean that you have to be there and save everybody, right? But it means that people are taking that first step to reach out. And it might be that you can then, you know, what's the word? Signpost them, to another service or another person. And I feel like we don't necessarily have one big solution, but the fact that we're having these conversations, the fact that you have the courage to come on here and people will watch this, that's a huge step. So to know that actually you don't always feel like the Bhat or the Simran is helping, or you don't always feel like you can talk to your family members, that's really important. But always know that there is something, and different things are going to work for different people. And I guess for us as a community is figuring out what can we offer to make sure that people have something that they can reach to.
One of the thoughts of piggybacking off what you said was our education system. So with my kids are in school, our kids are in school, and they're taught maths, science, English, but they're not taught like soft skills, like how do you manage your emotions? What do you do when you're feeling down? Like, what do you do when you're feeling angry? What do you do if someone speaks to you a certain way? You know, like how all of those things are probably more important than maths, English, and science are in terms of somebody's outcome in life. And we all know how important emotional intelligence is in terms of worldly success as well. But none of those things are taught in school, the whole education system. And I'm probably going to get grilled by any teachers out there, but the whole education system is focused around academics and rote learning and how much can you memorize. And whereas all of the things that matter when you're at my age as a male, getting towards middle age, all the things that matter, school, I don't remember 90% of what I learned in school, probably maybe 95%. But what I do really need to know is, how do I communicate with my wife? How do I have a good relationship with my son? How do I talk to my friend when I'm struggling with something? All of those things nobody teaches, apart from basics.
Well, I think that's really important, Viji. Again, you know, being part of the solution rather than the problem. So the biggest thing that we can do for the next generation is model that. So I've seen that in my house. The more that I've learned, and it's been a difficult road for me to connect to my emotions, to connect to my body, you know, to admit when I'm not feeling 100%, but just modeling that, just saying out loud, actually, you know what, mummy doesn't feel too well at the moment, and can you give me a hug, or can I talk to you about it? I had a situation recently where I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. I was unhappy about something. But I would keep asking the children, I was like, what do you think I should do? Because I'm upset about it. And they would give me advice, and that was amazing, because for me, they were actually helpful. They were saying the right things. But also it was modeling for them that if they find themselves in that situation themselves, that they know that they can come and talk to me, or they can talk to each other, or they can talk to somebody about it, and it's okay to not have all the answers. If we act as parents, or you know, as a person in the community, as if we have all the answers, then straight away that blocks it off. But if you admit that, I think Baljeet Singh's doing an amazing job as well, right? So he's being really open and honest about mental health. And I think that's a huge part of it. But also, you know, some of the things that we've been trying to do is bring like mindfulness into our local primary school as well. And, you know, there's been an uptake, and that's brilliant. But, you know, we start from our own home, you know, whether it's our brothers and sisters, whether it's our parents, and then we become part of that solution, because, you know, the teachers, they've been taught a certain way and they don't have much time to do anything outside of that. Whereas if we can model that and then offer that and go into the schools and talk to the children, talk to the teachers, then we can be part of that solution as well.
I wanted to talk about Bollywood.
Okay.
Because my mum used to rent VHSs from, if anyone knows Southall, where Featherstone is, there's like Puri Chemist or something. And you could, for £1, you could rent a Bollywood film, watch it for a week, and then get back and then get another one. So we spent our whole childhood watching Bollywood films. And it was, the positive out of that was I learned Hindi. But apart from that, you get conditioned that this is what life is going to be like. You're going to meet this person, you're going to run through a field, you're going to hug them, and then the rest of your life is going to be happy.
This explains a lot.
Yeah, I was really shocked when you didn't
run through the field with you.
I just kept running and nobody else was there. if you ever see me running around Slough, now you know what I'm doing. Still waiting for the day. But that conditioning, I think, is a problem now, because people get into relationships and they get divorced very quickly because they don't realize that actually all of that is false.
Yeah.
And that might be a very short period of time in a relationship. But then very quickly the challenges come, and you have to get through all of those challenges to still have a relationship.
Yeah.
And the way you get through those challenges is really important in a relationship, because like things that you say you can't take back. So, and we don't learn those skills.
What are your top tips? What have
don't
been
do
like
what
the
I
top
did.
5 things,
Just don't do what I do.
that you would say, look, if you're struggling
To a
or
male,
yeah.
I think males have a lot of ego, and I think that's a big problem, because in a relationship, you have this ego that I shouldn't be spoken to like this, or this person, no one can get away with saying this to me, or that kind of stuff. And then you're in a relationship and you're like, what did she just say? Did I hear that right? Can you say that again? And so that can hurt, and it can really rock you in terms of your ego, your sense of self, and your pride and your confidence, and all of those kind of image that you build about yourself, and that can shatter it. And I think it's difficult as a male to have to take that, because in a normal relationship or a friendship, you wouldn't take that kind of relationship where someone's saying negative things to you. But then you're married, and you have to figure out a way of getting through it and letting go and all of those kind of things. So I think if you can do anything to help with your ego, is really helpful. So that's probably why I struggled so much. But that's a big thing, I think, with males. It's like, and the other thing is, I think the dynamic has changed. So we as males, we can't think, oh yeah, I'm the male, so I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to be the breadwinner, and you're going to live with my mom and do her seva and all that kind of stuff. Because I think now the dynamics have changed, and women are working as well. They want like equal a voice in a relationship, and I think it's important to be aware of that it's much more of a partnership now than it used to be back in the days, where you could just do whatever you wanted and the wife would just be like, okay. What about from a female perspective?
Gosh, I think this is a long conversation.
I think the biggest thing for me has been learning how to communicate. Like that is the biggest thing that my husband and we've had to learn to have a healthy relationship, is to just be able to say what you're feeling. And I've learned it out of a book, to be completely honest. I've learned it through nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. So again, for me, it was, okay, he's been brought up a certain way, I've been brought up a certain way. We're both people pleasers, which isn't a healthy thing, which means we're always repressing how we feel and what we think in order to keep the peace, but it builds up. And then it's the volcano effect. So what I learned was, actually, I've got to learn how to express what my needs are in a non-confrontational way, and just say this is, and I take ownership, like, this is how I feel. It doesn't mean you're making me feel like this. It's just how I feel about the situation. It comes down to truth at the end of the day. This is my perception on it, but this is what I need as well. So would you be able to do that? And I don't necessarily use these really kind words that I'm using now, but I make the effort to do that. And I think by doing that, he's learning to do the same for me. And for me, even though I know it's more difficult for him to do that, I feel like it's my place to be constantly asking him, not constantly, but asking him consistently those questions like, are you okay? Is this okay? Would you mind if I did this? Or would you mind if you didn't do that? And just be open to that conversation, like you said, without the egos getting in the way, and just be like, actually, that's okay. I think the most important thing is I will try and invest as much time as I can, not into my husband, not into my children, but into myself. And the more that I'm investing into my own self-development to make myself a better person, the more that is then influencing my relationships with my husband, with my children, and the outside family. There's so much work to do yet. But I find that as I improve in terms of recognizing who I am and where I need to work, everything else improves as well around that.
I think, again, focusing on the self has really helped me. Because maybe we need some tips from you guys about communication, because I don't think we've mastered that. But it's not been a problem because we're both, I think, really trying to work hard on ourselves as individuals and not expecting so much from each other that we're just, and I think that allows us to appreciate each other. Like, especially, for example, you've been working more than normal and our dynamics changed. And I think that, you know, it's having to focus on myself and not expect so much from you has allowed me to just appreciate the time we have together. So I think it's the expectation that causes problems in marriage. Like, you should be doing this, or why aren't you doing this? And that usually, for me, that stemmed for so long from, I'm not happy, it's your fault. There's always a person there to blame. Like, if something's going wrong within me, then it's got to be my husband's fault. It's because he didn't put the socks in the laundry basket, you know?
I did.
He didn't. But I don't mind, you know? Like, that's the thing. Like, if I'm on top of my self-development, then a lot of things can be overlooked. And I feel that's the same with you. Like, if you've filled your cup, you're doing good kind of internally. You've done your training, you've done your Simran. You can overlook some of my flaws because we're not perfect, right? We're always getting things wrong.
Yeah, I think it's that taking responsibility for yourself and knowing that person's not going to complete you.
Yeah,
it is the biggest thing. Knowing that you are the only person that can make you happy.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm trying to think of it from a male perspective, because there's going to be scenarios where somebody isn't in a relationship, or they are, or they're further down the line, they've been married for a long time, and that those things aren't an issue. And thinking from the male perspective, I think all of those things resonate. You have to be kind of happy within yourself, and then everything works itself out.
Yeah.
But you can't have expectations of anybody, regardless of whether they're a partner or a parent, or because you will get let down.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not really fair on us to have expectations of other people that they are my mum, so they should do this, or you know, it's like, who says they should? Everyone's just trying to do their best. And when you are happy, then it will reflect in other relationships. You'll be better at managing the husband-wife dynamic or mother-son dynamic, all of those types of things.
And I think ideally, you know, Maharaj is telling us, was it Nivan Sakar Kavangun Jeba Maneamanth, you know, to have that humility, forgiveness, and sweet speech. And that's, you know, it doesn't come easy for all of us, but it's definitely something that we can work towards. Is if we can have that bit of humility, let go of things that have happened in the past. That's a big thing that will keep coming back over and over again. And just, you know, just working, you know, it's on our internal talk, because we will talk to others how we talk to ourselves. So if we don't have compassion for ourselves, then we're not going to have compassion for the other. So that's going to be a big part of that as well.
Are there any kind of services or any kind of information or resources that you might want to plug?
Yeah, I think maybe we could put them in the description. So there are lots of organizations trying to do some good work for men's mental health, Seek Forgiveness, Tarakki. They've got some initiatives out there, but we will put some more detailed, more detailed description of those in the comments. There's an 8-week course that's run a couple of times a year, and it's a healing and self-discovery course, and it's open to both men and women. And it's a combination of science, psychology, Gurbani, Sikhi. And the main thing is it's focused on kind of practical tools that we can embed within our lives to just help us to be more happier and more connected spiritually. And so we've done, I think, 2 or 3 courses of the same before, and they've been really incredible, both for us and the participants, and life-changing. And so we're running one soon, and we'll be running them regularly. So do keep a lookout. And
you'll have stuff on BoS TV, right? So people subscribe, then they can keep up to date with what you're doing.
That's right. Thank you so much. It's been, thank you for being so open.
It's nice to meet you.
Thank you for being so open and honest about your experience, and it's been really valuable, and I've learned some new things about you as well.
And this is just very narrow experience, and if I said anything to offend anybody, Pulchuk maaf karni, was not my intention, and it's just one experience out of many billions which are valuable. So it'd be great to have, if you want to come on the show, leave a comment in the comment box below. It'd be great to have different life experiences, different opinions.
And if you want us to speak about anything in particular, please do comment on the comments box, and we would love to explore certain topics that you're interested in further.
And don't forget to subscribe to BoS TV.
Just before we finish, do you mind taking us through some guided meditation, a little bit of Simran together?
Sure. So let's just take a moment to settle the mind and just connect to the breath for a few moments. Tuning into the breath as it flows in and out of the body. That breath, that swas, that's being given by our Creator at this very moment. Ape karta, kar kar vekhe, denda saas giraha hai. That gift of the breath. Let's just tune in. And as we begin to chant the mantra, Vahe Guru, as we breathe in, chanting Vahe and listening to the sound of our voice, as we breathe out, chanting Guru and listening, as Gurbani tells us, Tun meh dhyan, dhyan meh janiya, Gurmukh akat kahani. That placing our attention in the tun, in the sound, Tun meh dhyan, dhyan meh janiya. It's through that process that we come to know Gurmukh agat kahani, that internal story of the mind, how it was once connected to Vaheguru and how it becomes separate, and how we can merge back again. So as we do the Simran, bringing our mind into the present, connecting to the sound of the mantra, Vaheguru, 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 Waheguru, 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 Waheguru. Allowing the mind to do the chanting. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.